This week's Hidden History, we told you about Horatio Seymour's early entry into politics, his time as mayor of Utica, and his time in the state assembly. Now, in this week's part 2 on Seymour, he reaches the highest office in the state for the first time. Here's Joe Kelly and this week's Hidden History.
Horatio Seymour's tenure as governor of New York was brief. He lost his first bid for re-election in 1854 by just better than 300 votes. He returned to Utica and the family business, but politics was never far away. In fact, the opposition was now part of the family. In June of 1855, Seymour's sister, Julia, married prominent local lawyer and former Oneida County District Attorney Roscoe Conkling. Conkling was one of the most prominent members of the Whig Party in central New York. Seymour was not fond of his sister's choice for a husband. It was not so much Conkling's politics that Seymour didn't like, it was Conkling's style. Conkling was bombastic, loud in his oratory, and loud in his dress. Conkling's style was the opposite of Seymour. They were also at opposite sides of the country's biggest issue of the day, slavery, and the southern states' secession from the Union. The abolition of slavery was one of the underpinnings of the Republican Party, while the Northern Democrats were sympathetic to the position of their southern neighbors. By 1860, Horatio Seymour had emerged as one of the leaders in the Democratic Party, and a compromise had been proposed. It would have tolerated slavery in the southern states, where it was already established, but it would have also protected the practice from intervention by Congress. In 1861, at a state convention, Seymour promoted the adoption of the compromise. Although he didn't support slavery, Seymour was at best indifferent on the issue, but it was his way of keeping the nation together. In 1862, Seymour was elected to return to the office he held a decade earlier, but his second term as governor was even tougher than the first, and like his first term, it was to be one and done. But while Seymour was still governor, President Lincoln sought to weigh up the aspirations of Seymour and how likely it would be for him to achieve them. Lincoln wrote the governor a letter of introduction and stated that as head of the largest state in a nation at war, there should not be a difference of purpose between the two leaders. Some of Seymour's fellow Democrats read the letter as a sign of weakness on Lincoln's part and urged Seymour not to respond. But Seymour did respond. In that response, Seymour made clear his opposition to the war, but his deference to the policies of the president, as long as those policies were within the scope of the president's constitutional powers. Next week, Seymour sees Lincoln exceed those constitutional powers, and they result in Horatio Seymour being denied the office that Lincoln held. Produced with the cooperation of the Oneida County History Center, I'm Joe Kelly, and this is Hidden History.